The LGBTQIA community faces challenges of marginalization and discrimination in many facets of their lives, including some members of society trying to cure them. One of these painful experiences is that of conversion therapy, also known as reparative therapy, which is a pseudoscientific practice that tries to change an individual's sexual orientation from homosexuality or bisexuality to heterosexuality using spiritual or traditional interventions. Access Chapter 2 has launched a campaign called INXEBALAM, which will focus on the stories of LGBTI persons who have suffered at the hands of the idea of conversion imposed onto them by family, friends, workplaces, and religious structures. Joining us to tell us more about this is Executive Director at Access Chapter 2, Steve Letsike. Steve, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining me on Weekend Dawn, Channel 405. Now, INXEBALAM, tell us about this campaign. Where did it come from?
Thank you so much, and really good morning to you and to your viewers. INXEBALAM Campaign, started just over a year ago in a way that, we started having a need to really address, our own context as African in particular, in terms of how reparative or conversion therapy is playing out itself within our own local context. You would realize that in South Africa, there isn't any law or any formal recognition of the practice in a way because of the manner it's characterized or the manner it is being addressed. However, you have to think about what is the interplay of gender and sexuality. When a young person or when a child come out to say, "Mom, I'm gay," "Dad, I'm lesbian," or "I'm transgender" for that matter, and this is where you see the negative effects of children that exhibit their own sexual diversity. And these negative effects find itself following the LGBTI persons throughout their adulthood. You see quite a number of people that you will not be gay in my house, or it is an African to be gay, and also that you would be kicked out of the home, you would be prayed for at church, and so many things, and others, and many, of course, end up marrying people that they are not intending to marry because of forced circumstances.
So what would your advice be for somebody out there who's watching us having this conversation, who has recently been kicked out the house, or who is going to see a minister or a pastor to be prayed for so that they can do this conversion therapy and get their sexuality dictated? What would your advice be for them?
Look, my advice really predominantly is that people must be themselves. You have a place where you belong. And in many other churches who do not discriminate, or many other traditional leaders who do not discriminate, and many other families as well. Because when you look at research in South Africa, just over 56% South Africans are still tolerable. You have a 40 odd plus that still is discriminating and that still violate people's rights. So my advice really to LGBTI persons, you have to be yourself, empower yourself, know who you can trust, so that you have the full support during these times. And it's quite important. And one of the reasons we have launched this campaign, it's not only just to speak to LGBTI persons and the pain that has been inflicted to us as LGBTI persons over the decades of our childhood or even adulthood for that matter. I think what is important really as part of the campaign, we will be engaging, in fact we have started already engaging traditional leaders. We have been engaging various church leaders around the campaign, and to talk about the role of parents as well through the community dialogues that we are hosting across the country. I think it's quite important that people be themselves.
Now, let's look at structures like churches, for instance, and how churches are being brought into a situation like this. How does the mindset then change from religious institutions to not dictate to somebody how they need to live their life?
Look, many of our countries, many of our provinces, and even our local institutions, most Christians stand for the biblical distinction made about gender and sexuality, promoting, you find quite an extensive promotion of heteronormative precedents in this case. And this is one of the biggest challenge where you have to look at the interpretation of what is being Christ-like in this case. So why churches play a significant role is the influence around the principles of religion, and not only limiting it to Christianity for that matter. You have quite a spectrum of religion as an institution. And similarly, I think, we have to then speak about what are the principles of religion across the board, where God is love, where you speak about non-judgmental. There's no way you can acquit, God with hate. And we find this quite a lot in churches, that you find a practice directly or indirectly so, where churches play a significant role to spread also hate in a way. And that's what we need to be speaking about and unpacking, whether churches, whether religion, in a way is used in a right form in respecting its own principles.
But I'm happy that things are going a certain way. There's been some developments from a governmental point of view. The NCOP passing a law recently which forbids marriage officials from discriminating against same-sex couples due to their personal beliefs. A step in the right direction?
It did, indeed. I mean, look, South Africa has one of the celebrated constitution across the world. It's liberal, and one of the important things that we have been focusing on is making these rights a lived reality. Many LGBT organizations across the country is that you don't have a paper that speaks to equality, dignity, and integrity, and even freedoms for that matter. But in practice, then it plays out differently. And South Africa has also demonstrated by pieces of legislations. You talk about employment equity. You talk about many other policies, including the recent amendment of the Section 6 of the Civil Union Act itself. I mean, it is a step in the right direction. That clause was problematic, and also there are an extent even with the Civil Union Act where it kicks out other population even within the spectrum of LGBTI, like transgender individuals for that matter. So all the time, these pieces of legislations are important to review. They are important to actually look at the amendment, because the idea of many of our policies were also developed in a heteronormative context, and it leaves out some of the pieces or nuances of inequality. You find an LGBTI person walking into an interview, and immediately by virtue of how they look versus how their ID looks, they get discriminated, and already an inequality plays itself there. And these are some of the issues that we need to confront. We do have pockets of excellence. Indeed, in our country, we do have. And we also have a rather willing president who also understands the Constitution and was the architect of that. But we do, when it comes to practice, local municipalities and so forth, this is where you find an extent of a subtle discrimination one way or the other. And that's part of incompetence where even our own government...
How liberal South Africa is at times. Is INXEBALAM something that could be taken outside of the country? Because we know that it's a lot tougher for our African brothers in countries like Uganda, etc. Could we be spreading our wings and taking the campaign outside of South African borders in the near future?
No, indeed. In fact, because this is the partnership with three partners in Africa, one in Kenya, which is GALC, Gay and Lesbians of Kenya. You also have another partner in Nigeria, which we're trying to pilot these three countries. However, you should also realize the partnership is with Outright International and supported by the Netherlands government. The most important thing, we have a history in Africa and many other regions of colonial loss. We have to deal with the fact that before the colonial laws that we have, people lived and people were respected despite even talking about it. And of course, many people are talking about it now. People are coming out now, and people are comfortable with the idea of how we embrace each other as human beings and our own self-determination and bodily integrity. Indeed, in Africa, it's important that we focus on it, because 31 countries in Africa still criminalize homosexual acts. We celebrate Gabon, which just a week ago decriminalized homosexual act. But there are 31 countries that still criminalize homosexual act, who have the idea that being gay, being lesbian, is un-African. And this is problematic. I am a child of Africa, and I know no other regions or even westernized context. I was born here, and I was born of African parents and forefathers. So there's no way anybody else can come and tell me that you are not African if you are gay. I think that is problematic, and we find it even in our own country.
Steve Letsike, we'll leave it right there. I wish we could keep talking about this. These conversations need to happen, and a lot more people need to know about the truths that are behind walls. But we are going in the right direction, and I wish you all the best with your campaign. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us on Weekend Dawn. Steve Letsike, Executive Director at Access Chapter 2, talking about the INXEBALAM campaign, talking about how LGBTQI members are still being discriminated against and are still facing a lot of challenges. Now,